Good afternoon, High-10, Coldwell Banker Commercial, George Realty. Today we will be going over the standard multi-tenant shopping center lease net and AIR contract. And today will be an abbreviated class over what I've done before, where I went page by page, paragraph by paragraph. Today, what I'm going to be going over is if you brought a lease to me that you drafted, I would say, did you pay attention to these paragraphs? Now every paragraph is important and you should know the contract and read each page, take some time over the next month and read page by page and then ask questions that come up for you. But these are the things I've highlighted today that I would say to you, did you pay attention to this? Did you mention this to your client? So this is a very abbreviated version of training, but it's stuff that I would ask you. I had an agent recently bring me a lease, and this was this type of stuff I was asking him. So this is abbreviated. It's so that you just get familiar. The reason that we are going over these types of agreements is because it's a very profitable aspect of the business for you, and it also leads to listings. You meet a lot of people. So that's why we're going to keep teaching the commercial leasing, both formats, AIR and CAR. So I am going to share my screen now and get started. So I've attached forms that you're going to need to include in your lease agreement. I'm also going to add that from the CAR side, please include the CCPA. I didn't put it in this package today, but include the CCPA right behind your disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. Even if this is a very short-term lease, please always provide the agency. AIR has their own, so I've included that one. And you'll notice here that not only is the lessee going to be signing and dating as well as the agent, they're going to be initialing each page here of this agreement, disclosure, excuse me. So they want initials on each page by the tenant, which is a little bit different than CAR, okay? So the standard multi-tenant shopping center lease net, on these contracts, what they've done is most of your fillable sections are going to reside on page 1 and 2 of the lease, with the exception, of course, of filling in the signature boxes and a couple of check boxes at the back of the lease that I'll show you. So we don't want to forget those back of the lease check boxes, but I'm going to go over the front 2 pages. So we drafted this today, so that's the date for reference purposes only. The lessor is XYZ LLC. The lessee is ABC LLC. When you are dealing with entities, please make sure that you have entity documents that show, especially for a tenant, that you are dealing with the managing member or the authorized signer of that entity. You can pull that off of this California Secretary of State if they are a California LLC, or simply ask the tenant to provide the document, because the landlord will also want to see that. They want to make sure that the signator is the right individual, okay? So the premises, I filled out here the address. It's in the county of Los Angeles in this sample. Now, briefly describe the nature of the premises. I've been in the trainings, they say never get tied up with square footages as your description. So I have not added that in. What I put is retail unit located in shopping center, in Alhambra, California, something like that, but don't get tied into square footages, okay? Because different measurements by different people. So we don't want to make this about the square footage, okay? So just describe it briefly here. And down here, the shopping center is commonly known as Happy Place Shopping Plaza, whatever the name is. So in this sample, the term is going to be 3 years and 0 months. We're going to commence on September 1st and end on August 31st, 2028. Early possession, I did not fill in. We're not allowing it unless, if you did, then you would put an early possession date. and you need insurance. And I'll show you that. Even if they take early possession, don't let them in without an insurance cert, and that's embedded in the lease. I'll show you. Base rent in this sample is going to be $3,600 per month, due on payable on the first of the month, and it commences September 1. I've checked the box below because the rental amount is going to increase each year annually. So make sure you don't miss this little checkbox here. And then I numbered it paragraph 51 because there's 50 paragraphs in this agreement. So the next paragraph up is 51. So I've named this one paragraph 51 and I've attached the appropriate form. The lessee share of the common area operating expenses is going to be $750 per month, which is roughly about 50 cents per square foot. My sample is a 15,000 square foot plaza. This unit is 10%, so that would be 1,500 square feet. These you can ask the landlord for the percentage, and of course they're going to supply your the common area operating monthly expense. There is no merchant's annual dues here. I can't put a 0, so I've just left it blank. So down here, the base rent and other monies paid upon execution of lease, and we want this made payable to the landlord or lessor via cashier's check. So the base rent is $3,600. We need to put in the dates that that's covering. The common area maintenance is $750. We need to tell the period that $750 is covering. The security deposit in this sample, I've taken 36 plus 750 times it by 2 because that's what the lessor wanted. So it's $8,700. This is an NA here. There's no other. So total due upon lease execution is going to be $13,050 via cashier's check. Just remember that. Have a cashier's check from the tenant. So the agreed use is very important. So the agreed use for this sample is retail use for home accessory sales and other home-related merchandise. So as a tenant, you want it broad. Sometimes the landlords try to make it less broad, but you need to make sure you're covering exactly what that tenant is doing. Normally, you're going to hash this out in a letter of intent. You're going to have the agreed use in there. Sometimes one of the landlords we work with will always come back and ask some questions about your agreed use. That way they can make sure that they don't have any other tenants with an exclusive use clause in the facility. We don't recommend exclusive use, but however, some landlords may have exclusive use tenants there. So you want to be right up front with your agreed use, but make sure it's broad enough to cover what your client will be doing. The agreed trade name, in this case, it's Your Shop for Home. However, sometimes you'll see a TBD in there where they're working on that agreed trade name and the paperwork that goes along with it. Okay. So coming down to the representation, always make sure this is filled out properly. In this sample, we're dual, we're representing both the lessor and the lessee. Payment to brokers. Don't forget this box. So you put here, it's 5% of the total base rent for the brokerage services rendered by brokers with an S. So that would cover both brokers. However, you need to know ahead of time how the split's going to occur. You talk to the listing agent. And in your letter of intent, when you are looking for a lease, write in the commission right in there. The commission amount, total of 5%, split equally between the brokerages or whatever the case may be. So you want to have that already hashed out in your letter of intent. This is an LLC, so we need an individual to be the guarantor. So in this case, it's Sharon Wee will be our guarantor. So it's not just good enough to put the name there. You also need the guarantee document, which I've attached, and we'll go over that. So Sharon Wee will be your guarantor for this, and we will have her execute a different document as well. Now, she very well may be signing for the LLC as the managing member and the guarantor, or maybe she's a different guarantor and there's a different managing member that's going to sign, or maybe there's two managing members. But in any case, we need an individual to guarantee the lease. So this is, you're at the point where they've already submitted, of course, their application. The lessor has looked at their credit and all of that. So now we're at that point. So the attachments, sometimes you have an addendum and you're going to write some additional items in there. In this example, to keep it simple, I didn't. But if we needed to, I could help you if you were in a lease situation where you felt like you needed an addendum. We could help you write, take a look at that. But even though these are attached to the lease, I always specify, because I don't want any mix-up saying, hey, that wasn't attached at the time. I always want to put my attachments. I'm always going to have them in there, even the guarantee of the lease. So you always want to specify what attachments are going with the lease so they can never be separated, or it can never be said that they weren't attached, okay? So again, I am going like I would be asking you, hey, did you look at this? Did you look at that? This is a very brief training. Every paragraph is important, but we will not be covering every paragraph. So right here, it says the premises. While the approximate square foot of the premises may have been used in marketing, the base rent is not tied to the square footage and is not subject to adjustment should the actual size be determined to be different. So right here in bold, they're saying the lessee is advised to verify the actual size, excuse me, prior to executing the lease. So even in a small unit, we've had a tenant that came over and measured everything and then started hashing out things in the LOI. Don't block them from measuring, let them measure if they want to, because it's a protection for everybody involved, okay? But right here, it's telling everybody that, hey, this lease is pretty much market value. It's not tied to a cost per square foot, okay? The condition, the premises is going to be delivered in broom clean and free of debris on the commencement date or early possession, if that's applicable. And so there is a warranty period that's really important. I wanted to go over because sometimes this very small print. So there's warranty periods for the tenant. So there's 6 months for the HVAC system and 30 days for all remaining systems and all other elements of the premises. And so if the tenant does not give the landlord a notice within that warranty period, these warranty periods up here, 6 months and 30 days, correction of non-compliance could fall to the tenant. So you always want to point out the warranty periods. Maybe the tenant feels like 6 months for the HVAC isn't enough. Maybe they're going to ask for a year due to the age or something like that of the HVAC unit. So you always want to know your warranty periods. And in this, it's not like, you have to kind of look by paragraph. Okay, so these are things I would always point out to a newer agent working on an AIR. Know your warranty periods for your client, so you can point that out to them. Okay, so the lessee is responsible themselves for determining whether or not applicable requirements for zoning are appropriate for their intended use, and the and acknowledges that past uses of the premise may no longer be allowed. We have ran into that. The client went to the city. The unit was no longer allowed to be an office. The city decided on their own they wanted it to be retail. So you really have to advise your client, hey, I know it's an office and it's, the same use, but please check with the city. We don't check with the city. We ask the client to check with the city so that they're comfortable when they go to get their business license. They've already been there. They've already checked. Okay. So you need to make sure that they are going to the city on their own, not you, just to check. It only takes a few minutes. Let them go do a quick check or give a call into the city. give them the address, let them know their intended use in that premises, just to make sure that use is still available for the location, okay? So this 2.4 is an acknowledgement paragraph, and this is where the lessee, by virtue of signing this document, acknowledges that they have been given the opportunity to inspect and measure the premises, and it has been advised by the lessor or broker to satisfy themselves with the size and conditions of the premises. So it's very important that you say, hey, if you want to inspect and measure the premises, feel free to, if you represent a tenant. Okay, so these are just things, if they feel very strongly about it, let them do it, because they're acknowledging here that they've done it, okay? So that acknowledgement is important. Vehicle parking, you know, there's always going to be rules in a shopping plaza. Normally, I like to note that it's on an addendum that the parking is first come, first served, because unless they have reserved in front of them, you know, that's how it's going to operate. And then there's, of course, rules for loading vehicles and stuff like that. So if they're going to be having loading trucks come in, make sure that you find out what the hours of operation, because some landlords take the loading from like 7 to 9 a.m. Maybe that won't work for their particular business. So you need to find out when the landlord in large plazas allows for loading, and work that out if it doesn't coincide with the hours that your tenant may need, okay? So again, I'm only going to go over a few things. Okay, go ahead.
Do tenant hire physical inspector and do the physical inspection for residential commercial lease?
I've seen them hire an HVAC contractor, just like if it's a single HVAC unit, I've seen them do that several times. I recently saw a second-gen restaurant that had a grease trap. They hired somebody to inspect the grease trap, things like that. So yes, I have seen inspectors in there. They're a little more specialized. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, that's definitely.
It's a good idea.
Like if you're a restaurant, we want to make sure everything that the restaurant need has to be in place before you lease the place, you know, or.
Because there's different types of grease traps, type 1 and 2. So you need to know what you're dealing with, and we're not expert on that normally. So we want them to inspect those components.
Kind of the same line, I'm concerned with the air conditioning unit.
Yes.
So you sign, they give you a 6 months warranty. Let's say the 8th month, the whole unit went out.
Yeah.
And you're on both sides. If I'm the tenant, should I get like a home warranty? Because that could be who's gonna fix that after the 8th month? I mean, you totally need a home unit.
Yeah.
Let's say Christine did the inspection, it's 10 years old. So you don't know if it's gonna go bad.
Well,
usually, if it is a complete
failure,
replacement, the landlord is responsible.
Even though it says 6 months there. Okay, that was my main.
Yeah, and you know, those are the things, like when I said I didn't put an addendum in this.
Right.
Yeah.
But you could put,
yeah,
you could put in the addendum.
The warranty for 6 months, and even the maintenance is the landlord during the 6 months.
Yeah, so the addendum you
I
could
get
put
it.
together, you could put HVAC shall be warranted by lessor for a period of 1 year. However, if as long as the tenant is doing normal maintenance, which quarterly they require, then if a complete failure, then it, you know, the landlord shall replace it. If you want to be that specific in your addendum, you can.
Yeah.
If that makes your client feel better, you should be doing addendum those items, okay? So that there's no like something they're staring at, worried if they're going to have a huge cost. Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So here, this is really important on 3.4. The lessor is not required to tender possession of the premises until the lessee complies with the obligation to provide evidence of insurance. So even if they waited over a month to give it to you and rent became due, they still owe the rent. Excuse me. Don't give them the keys or anything like that if they haven't given the landlord the evidence of insurance.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Common area operating expenses. I just kind of highlighted this so you could read it. But I'm going to make a suggestion here. Real property taxes. If that property sold, right, the property taxes jump,
right.
correct? So, and that's part of your CAM expenses, your common area maintenance. You may want to cap it. So, you know, you could cap it in an addendum. That the property taxes shall not increase by more than, I don't know, pick a number, 3% annually, something like that. So if there was a large jump, your client's protected. So these are just pro tips that I've learned working with Shumei. So these are pro tips. So
Training.
that is the best training when you work with a high producer. So you want to take care of your client, you want to cap it, okay? Because even if they said, oh, we're never going to sell, hey, you don't know. Cap it. Take care of your client, okay?
Usually, right now it's protected by Proposition 13, which means that they cannot increase your property tax for more than 5%. And but see, if you sell the property, you know, then it's the market value.
Right.
Prop 13 is 2%.
Proposition.
1.25%. Oh, you mean the
No,
increase?
the property tax.
Right.
It's 3%.
2%.
2%?
Mm.
Oh.
Sorry.
So lessee share of common area operating expenses, it says it right here. It's payable on the same day as the base rent is due, okay? So at the end of the year or after the end of a year that you were paying within 60 days after written request, but no more than once a year. If the tenant asks, then the landlord shall deliver the tenant a reasonably detailed statement showing their share of the actual common area operating expenses for the preceding year. So if the tenant payments due exceeded the lessee's share, the lessor is going to credit back that funds. But if it was short, then they're going to bill it, and that money shall be due within 10 days after delivery of that invoice by lessor to the lessee, okay? So they can do a wrap-up for you, but you have to request it, an annual wrap-up, okay?
Where are we?
We are on page 5 at the very end, D. So you have the contract in front of you. The only things I'm going over are the highlighted things that I would point out to you as an agent. Every paragraph's important. You need to read it, but we're going quickly over what I would point to very quickly if you asked me. The security deposit, number 5. The security deposit is not to be used by the tenant in lieu of payment of the last month's rent. And within 90 days after the expiration or termination of the lease, the lessor needs to return the security deposit or the portion thereof not used or applied by the lessor. So they have 90 days after. Okay, so it's a little bit different than residential. So I just wanted to point that out to you. So here's the agreed use and trade name. That's why it's so important that you get the right use. You need to really make sure when you have that put into your LOI and into the lease, that the lessee understands that they're only going to occupy the premises for the agreed use and trade name. Okay, I just highlighted this because I find it a little bit interesting. Other than guide dogs and signal animals, seeing eye dogs, the lessee is not allowed to keep any pets, animals, birds, fish, or reptiles in the unit. So if you wanted that little fish tank or whatever, you need to ask permission first. Because that's kind of interesting to me, but probably because they don't want a fish tank that has water in it in their property. but I just highlighted that for you. So we're going to drop. Now this is important. You're going to look at the maintenance, repairs, utility, trade fixtures and altercation 7.1. The lessee shall at their sole expense keep the premises utility installations intended for lessee's exclusive use no matter where they are located in good order and condition and repair, including but not limited to all equipment or facilities such as plumbing, HVAC equipment, electrical lighting, facilities, boilers, etc. So I highlighted this because you can also put in the addendum, like if you felt like, oh, wait, we don't want to be responsible for all the plumbing because maybe it's a building where everything's interconnected. You could write that in your LOI and hash that out in the beginning because it is right here in the contract. So I just want to point that out. Also on 7.1B, the lessee is required to maintain service contracts and provide the lessor with a copy of those service contracts, specializing in the maintenance of HVACs and such. So you need to be aware of that and let your tenant know that they are required to obtain and maintain service contracts for the duration of the lease, okay? So failure to perform, if the lessee fails to perform the obligations under paragraph 7.1, then the lessor can perform such tasks, and the lessee shall promptly pay the lessor a sum equal to 15% of the cost thereof. Okay. So the lessor's obligation, they're going to keep and repair, keep in good condition and repair foundations, exterior walls, structural condition of interior bearing walls, exterior roof, fire sprinkler system, common area, fire alarm, and smoke detection, etc. So I just point that out so you can read in 7.2 what the lessor's obligation are on this property. 7.3, utility installations and trade fixtures alterations. I'm going to drop right down to 7.4, ownership. Okay. Subject to lessor's right to require removal or elect ownership. So the owner of the property or the landlord can elect to own whatever you installed, or they can require that you remove it. So make sure, like if there was special things that you know you're installing that they are going to want to remove, that you put that up front and get coverage for that for your client. But they can either elect to own it or ask you to remove it. So that's up to the lessor's sole discretion on installations, okay? Okay, so insurance, I always tell people to make a copy of the paragraph 8 in its entirety and provide it to their favorite insurance carrier. But here I want to highlight this. This is embedded in the lease that the tenant needs to have a single limit coverage in amount less than $1 million per occurrence and an annual aggregate of not less than $2 million. Now on restaurants, you're going to see that increase. You're going to see the 2 million right up to about 3 million because of the nature of the business. So the landlord may override if it's a restaurant or something like that, up to 3 million I've seen. Okay. So I've highlighted down here, the lessee also needs to have these 3 types of insurance on 8.4. Since we're not insurance experts, most of us, I always tell the tenant to hurry up and send these pages over to their insurance agent so they can be working on this ahead of time so they can gain access to the unit at commencement, okay? Okay, real property taxes. Right here, I'm showing you that it says it is included in the common area, and I'm reminding you again to cap for your client. Cap that amount just in case, okay? Utilities and services. We are on paragraph 11. You follow the highlights, Christine, and what I handed out. Only the highlighted paragraphs, paragraph 11, are going to be covered in this training. If you need more detailed, I'm happy to sit with any of you and go over everything. So utilities and services, the lessee is required to pay for lessee/tenant all water, gas, heat, light, power, telephone, trash disposal, and other utilities and services supplied to the premise. And let's see, if at any time the lessors deems that the lessee is using more than their fair share amount of water, electricity, common area metered utilities, etc., they can increase the lessee's base rent. So for instance, a lot of times we'll put into leases, like in office buildings, if the tenant, the landlord's paying for the trash pickup, right? A big bin. But if it's deemed that that tenant is throwing away more trash than would be applicable to a small office, their rent will increase. And that's a lot of times we put that in the addendum, because that's where the problem occurs a lot of times, is the trash, right? So, but anyway, your utilities are all covered right here in paragraph 11. Sometimes we forget that and we start writing in addendums what they're going to be paying for, but you can refer to 11 and it's already in there. Okay. I'm not going to go a lot into assignment and subletting. Suffice to say that you do need lessor's consent. One other thing that I want you to know is that the original tenant would still be responsible for this lease, okay? Unless that is negotiated that they're not, but they will not let the tenant off the hook, the original tenant. So if you're telling your client, oh, it's okay, just, sublease it or whatever, make sure they understand that they're still responsible unless the landlord agrees that they're not in writing, okay?
Some of the anchor tenants like Ross and the May company and big anchor tenant like that, they have the lease to stipulate that once they assign, that's the end of the responsibility.
Oh, that's
You have-
great.
Yeah, then you have to be careful of that when you first when you review the lease for your client, and make sure that you catch that and inform your client accordingly. Otherwise, it'll be a surprise and that, oh, well,
Yeah.
generally, the original lease lessee will be responsible for that, but then when they sold the business to another
Yeah,
company, then they're off the hook.
yeah,
So you have to tell your client that is a special arrangement. So
yeah.
It's not all the,
It's not all cookie cutter the
Right,
same.
right.
Yeah. These are just tips that you look for. And if you ask for the sublease, it's going to cost $500 from the tenant just for consideration by the landlord. They're going to need to pay him $500, okay?
Extra,
Huh?
extra.
Extra. Yeah, just for consideration, not approval, for consideration. So late charges, I wanted to highlight that because people are always like, well, what's the late charges? So if any rent is not received by the landlord within 5 days after the due date, without any requirement of notice to the tenant shall immediately pay to the landlord a one-time late charge equal to 10% of the overdue amount or $100, whichever is greater. If you want to amend that, you can, but there's your late charge fees. Okay. And interest, why did I? So, okay, if you, other than late charges not received by the landlord when due, interest from the 31st day after it was due will begin. The interest charge shall be computed at a rate of 10% per annum, but not to exceed the amount, maximum amount allowed by law. Okay. So you can charge interest on the on late rents, okay? But I don't know, most landlords, probably they're not, because that's a hassle, but it is in the contract. This is what I want you to pay attention to on the brokerage fees here. Now, if you're representing number 15, paragraph 15, sorry, I just start skipping too fast. So if you're representing a landlord, you may want to really pay some attention to this. The lessor agrees that if the lessee exercises any option, then all the brokers get paid. Okay, so they're going to pay it in accordance with the original fee schedule. So if you're representing a landlord, you could put in something like commission shall only be paid on initial shall be paid on initial term only. Okay, so just so you're aware that that is embedded in this agreement, it's a good protection for brokers, but maybe the landlord doesn't want to do that. Okay.
Honest with your client, in the very beginning, otherwise when the surprises, they come back and not very.
Yeah.
On that.
People don't like that.
Yeah.
Estoppel certificates by either party shall be due 10 days after written notices from each party to provide it. So the landlord may need it for a lender. The tenant, I'm not sure for what. Maybe they're applying for some line of credit, but at any rate, it's due 10 days from each party after they write for it. Okay. So I'm going to go all the way back down here. Now, remember I said the first 2 pages are your fill outs. These are the other 2 boxes you need to pay attention to. Arbitration of disputes. We don't attach it ever. Well, I always just check is not attached. I never throw that in.
Where are you?
I am on 49. I'm on page 21 of 23. Yeah. So on 49, we normally, with Shumay and I, we don't attach an arbitration of disputes. So it's always is not. Now, Accessibility Americans with Disability Act, have not undergone an inspection by a certified access specialist. That is a question for the owner or the landlord. So you need to ask them that, but it's okay to put have not, you don't need to trip out about that. If it hasn't, it hasn't. Okay. So those are the 2 extras that you need to fill out on this lease agreement. And those that have the copies, it's highlighted for you. So then of course you fill out all of this here properly, and I'm going to go to the attachments. That's the wrong one. Okay. Guarantee of lease. Okay, you can see this is all populated from when I filled out the lease. I do have to type in Sharon Wee's name. She is the guarantor. And then this is just all, and they have to initial each page. Now, if the guarantor is different from the signer, the tenant, I would probably have the guarantor and the tenant initial this, and then the landlord's going to initial over here, okay? So coming on down, this is all boilerplate here. You fill this out. Maybe the title is, managing member / business owner. Make sure you have all of this. You may want this to be notarized. I know some of the larger landlords on a guarantee, they do want it notarized, and some they don't. I prefer that this is not e-signed on a guarantee. That is up to the landlord, though you can ask. I like wet signature on it, but again, you ask the landlord about that. Okay, so that's your guarantee.
I have to point out that the guarantee or lease is a statute of fraud. It means that it has to be in writing. We cannot be oral,
Yeah.
You cannot shake your hands and say, okay, I'll guarantee the lease. You can't.
Of course.
You have to be in writing and sign.
Yeah. And do you recommend a wet signature on the guarantee? Yeah. I do too. I just, for some reason on that document, I really don't like the e-signature.
Yeah, because if they have any dispute at all,
Yeah.
and they say, oh, I didn't sign it. Well, if the wet signature, you did sign it.
Yeah. And then the rent adjustments page, see, this is numbered paragraph 51. Okay, and this all populates for you, but let's come on down. So you have choices here. You can either go by CPI, which is kind of hard to, figure out, but if that's what the landlord wants, it's really up to them. Or a fixed percentage. What we usually do is the fixed rental rate adjustment. So this is the adjustment date here. Remember, we're on a 3-year lease. So the next adjustment is here. This is a 3% increase. Now, this is only base rent. The CAM fee is a whole different thing because that floats with whatever the costs are, right, annually. That doesn't have to do with the base rent. And then it increases again at another 3% here. So that's fixed rate is what we normally do, but it's really up to the landlord how they want to handle that. So you have fixed percentage, you have CPI or a fixed rental adjustment.
3% is lower than.
Yeah. So I'm just using examples, but you talk to the landlord, maybe they want to do 5%, whatever increase that they think is good for them and fair. Okay, option to extend is important. Term of 36 months. So this is paragraph 52. The landlord's going to allow one option to extend, term of 36 months. Remember, this is months here. And then it goes here, you have to give them how many months do you want to receive notice? At least 4 months ahead of time of lease expiration, but not more than 6 months. So you want to at least give 4 months because if they're not exercising this option, then the landlord knows that they're going to need to release that. Okay. And they might want to start working on that. So again, during the option period, option to extend, they have all of these options here, fair market value, CPI, however they're going to increase. You can do a fixed rate or you can do it faster and just do the continuation of the original term adjustments and put the date here. We normally, to be honest, we click this and we just keep filling it out, whatever the percentage up is, so that they can see all of the financial data. But for this example, I just did a continuation. But I would recommend if you're doing a fixed rate rental adjustment, just continue it down here. Okay. Are there any questions?
Yes, Michelle. If the lease is extended, shall we also pay commission on the extension?
If the what?
If the lease is extended for
Lease
3 more
extended.
years, shall the lessor pay commission?
Well, it's embedded in the contract, but it depends on your negotiation. Yeah. Some will only pay initial term. So when you write an LOI, you put commission to be paid, initial term, and option term. But not all landlords will agree to an option, but some may. It depends on, the lease, I guess.
So,
Already I mentioned the lease for 3 years. Shall we mention 5?
Oh, yeah, you want to go, if they want to do 10, do 10. Yeah, now a lot of landlords, if it's a 10-year lease, there's going to be a structure that taps down the commission, right? You may start out at 6 and then it's going to go to 5, all the way down. It can go to 1% in the 10th year, but it's because it's a long lease, so they tap down
Put it on the letter of intent.
everything on the letter of intent. Now, a letter of intent is non-binding. However, at least you're putting it out front. And then when you review the lease for your client, you always want to review against letter of intent and any counters to that letter of intent. Have it in front of you.
Yeah.
Because that can get, sometimes you can be 3 deep in those, right? With the letter of intent, a couple of responses. So you need to really be careful and check mark off and make sure that you go back and forth with the lease.
so let's say 5-year lease. And the real estate commission, we get all the commission based on the 5-year lease upfront.
No. So how they normally pay, yes, that would be great, right? But how it's normally done is upon lease execution within a week, because you got to give a company or a landlord time to react, right? You need to invoice them. So you're invoicing for 50% upon lease execution, right? And it'll take them about a week or maybe 10 days to get that check over to you. The second half comes when the tenant, either commences and takes possession of the unit or opens for business, because sometimes just because they took possession, they're doing some work inside. So a landlord will either structure it on when they take possession of the unit, or one that we work with says when they open for business. So that's when you would do your second half.
Oh,
Now, a small mom and pop, where it's a small unit, you just invoice the whole thing. And if they say, oh, you can only get half right now, okay, fine, I'll invoice you the second half later. But if it's a smaller complex, I would probably recommend invoicing the whole amount. They'll tell you if they're only going to pay you half. But that's how it normally works.
last time I did everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's great. You could always try for the whole thing, but some of your larger landlords are only going to do 50% and 50%. Yeah. So any questions?
Thank you.
So this was a fast one. If, like I said, all pages in this lease are extremely important. So if you are really looking to study and read more, we can go over more pages as each individual agent needs it, or when you're getting into an agreement, stop by and see Peter and I. We're happy to help you to expand your business into commercial leasing if you haven't done that yet. Okay. All right, everybody.
Michelle.
Pretty quiet. So I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for attending, and we'll see you next week, Monday.
Yeah.